The book of Esther identifies its antagonist as Haman ha'Agagi, Haman the Agagite. The rabbis understood this to be a reference to the Amalekite king Agag, with whom King Saul waged war in the first book of Samuel, and that, therefore, Haman himself was an Amalekite by birth. This rabbinic understanding frames Haman's plot to eliminate the Jewish people, and also the Jewish people's triumphant retaliation, as volleys back and forth in the ongoing war between Israel and Amalek, a war originally launched by the ambush sprung by the Amalekites against the Israelites in the wilderness. This struggle against Amalek is a pervasive motif on Purim, which we celebrate this coming week, as well as the subject of this Shabbat's special Torah portion, Parashat Zachor, which begins with that word, Zachor, which means remember. Remember what Amalek did to you on the road as you left Egypt. This reading gives our pre-Purim Shabbat its name, Shabbat Zachor, the Sabbath of remembrance. For many rabbinic commentators, the message of Amalek is the historically ubiquitous threat of anti-Semitism, the constant warning to the Jewish people to defend themselves, to fight back against those who would attack them simply because they are Jewish. But some contemporary Jewish thinkers see the war against Amalek less as an external battle against a specific foe, more of an internal battle, a battle against an idea. They see the story not as paradigmatic, but rather as metaphoric, that there is a struggle against Amalek within each of us all. One example of this latter approach is that of Rabbi Moshe Avigdor Amiel, who served as the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv in the years preceding the establishment of the State of Israel. According to Rabbi Amiel, Amalek represents a culture of militarism, especially militarism paired with nationalism. Amalek represents those who define themselves and their societies in terms of their power and their dominance over others. So for Rabbi Amiel, Amalek does not just threaten the Jewish people. By fostering a climate of perpetual conflict between nations in which only strength can provide security, Amalek actually threatens the entire world. At the end of the Purim story, the Jews successfully launch a counteroffensive against those who would have done them harm, in the process killing upwards of 75,000 people. Despite this, according to Rabbi Amiel, this battle, as impressive and as necessary as it was, does not represent a conclusive defeat of Amalek. If anything, the assertion of overwhelming Jewish strength may actually have been a little too close for comfort. It accepts Amalek's premise that peace can only be fully attained by violently repressing enemies who are themselves constantly waiting for the chance to rise up and try again. It obscures the reality, says Rabbi Amiel, that ultimately violence cannot solve violence. A popular Talmudic tradition teaches that on Purim one should drink wine or liquor to the point where one cannot distinguish between Haman the villain and Mordechai the hero of the story. Perhaps the message is that Haman and Mordechai are closer to being two sides of the same coin than we would like to admit when we have our faculties about us. Perhaps this explains the ritual observances of Purim, a festive meal with invited guests, gifts of food to friends and neighbors, generous donations to the poor. None of these have anything to do with the peace through strength approach of Amalek. Instead, these observances are about bringing people closer together, about building community, about developing empathy, and about fostering deep relationships. Rather than celebrating victory in armed conflict, these joyful practices model an alternative path forward. In our world, steeped as it is in power struggle, conflict, and violence, these observances, rituals, and practices are perhaps more important than ever. Shabbat Shalom and Purim Sameach, a joyful, meaningful Purim for you and your loved ones.